your story, your roots, and I thanked Valdas, whom I know for many years, and I know how much he cares about the place you both are connected to. I would like him to share his story, and then to ask you to share yours.
So we continue in English only, right? It's okay? Continue in English? Okay, so Jan asked me to start and to tell how the story started. So, yeah, and now it's suddenly we've spent a week together. It's becoming such a long story already. But it was about 2 years ago I found out, thanks to Joanne's cousin who came here first visit, somehow by email we found out there is a jewel that was lost and found. And this is the jewel that was written by Joanne's grandfather Solomon Fedler, who was born in 1897 in Žagarė. Had incredibly difficult journey through 2 wars, from Lithuania to deportation in Ukraine through World War I, then trip from Žagarė to South Africa. Extraordinary trip, and why I'm saying this is a jewel, you know, probably people who know me know that we are every day trying to make contacts and search for information about earliest days of Jewish life in Žagarė, in Lithuania, and probably everybody knows that Žagarė was known and is known that it was Hamhei of Žagarė, a city of extremely educated people, gave start to 2 Nobel Prize winners, extremely worldwide known rabbis and scientists and writers. So yes, but we still know very little about early times of 20th century, 19th century, and I was through many years of research and communication and writing and connections. I was dreaming of that book, and I was keep telling people, yeah, there must be something, you know, that we must read. There must be, out of these many persons who left before war to America, to South Africa, to Israel, that there must be someone who wrote the story about Žagarė, and here it is. And this is how we got in touch with Joanne. So just shortly to say that when I read it twice now, this book, and it's absolutely marvelous. We have those facts we were missing about Žagarė, about the daily life pre-war, beginning 20th century life in daily life, Jewish life in Žagarė, facts, culture, daily troubles, extremely hard days of poverty, survival, illnesses and habits and neighborhoods and love stories and blessings, you know, secret blessings that were curing other people. So it's absolutely amazing book, and we're going to translate it into Lithuanian, present it to the public. I think the Žagarė will definitely appreciate the Žagarė community, and the English edition as well will be available worldwide. So this is what we're working now, and this is how it is. So Joanne, please tell
Okay.
more about that trip.
I will. Thank you so much.
Which is going now through 19th century, 20th century, and 21st century. Your family trip, and here we are.
It is. It's amazing. Thank you to those of you who've come to tonight. You know, to me, my grandfather was just this funny little sort of man with a Yiddish accent who I hardly knew very well. He died when I was 18, and he'd come to South Africa as a young man. My grandmother had died young. My father lost his mother when he was 13, and my grandfather remarried a Holocaust survivor. And he wrote this book, and I remember in the family that it was regarded as a bit of a joke, because he was writing in English. English was not his first language. And he was bothering everybody. As an old man, he was bothering everybody with this project of his. And somebody said to him, "Who the hell is going to read this book? Why are you writing it? Who the hell is going to read it?" And my mother said, "Keep going, Solomon. I will read your book. I will read your book." And so he wrote this book, and he was a printer. So he printed, I think, like 100 copies or 200 copies, and he gave them out to anybody who would take a copy. Like he was, you know, foisting, "Hey, you want my book? You want my book? You want my book?" Everybody got one for a bar mitzvah present. And nobody took this seriously, this book. It was just my grandfather, you know, doing something in his old age, telling his stories. And I got a copy, all the grandchildren got copies, and I never looked at it. It sat on my bookshelf. And when I began to work on my very first novel, because I'm a writer, I wrote a book called The Dream Plot. And it's a story about a young girl growing up in South Africa, Jewish, and she is haunted by the ghost of her grandmother who has died. I was very influenced by Toni Morrison. I don't know if you know the American author Toni Morrison, but I loved her book Beloved, which is about a ghost, a child ghost that haunts and causes trouble. I wanted to write a story about a ghost who haunts, and I wrote about, and then I started to conceive of this love story that happened between two women who lived in a shtetl. And the one was a seamstress, and the one was a poet, and they met in the bathhouse. And I remembered, oh, my grandfather's written a book about life in the shtetl. So I picked up my copy of Shalechet, and I read, and I stole all the details about what it was like to be living in a shtetl, going to the bathhouse, you know, the pripet shop, which was how you used to make your meals. And I wrote that love story. That was the first time that I read Shalechet. And I was really I was a thief. I was just stealing stories for my own purposes, to write my novel. And I in the last, I would say, maybe 5 or 10 years, as an immigrant, I left South Africa in 2001. My family experienced some very terrible violence in our family, and I moved with my 2 young children and my husband to Australia. And I remember, and then I wrote a book about immigration, about what it was like to immigrate, leave the country I was born, and moved to a new country, and I wrote it in 2010. It was called When Hungry Eat, and it was literally about what it was like to leave the country you're born in and move to another country, because I found immigration very tough. Even though I was moving from one English-speaking country to another English-speaking country, it was still very difficult. And I read Shalechet again, and I compared the journey of immigration that I had, getting on an aeroplane, having all your possessions put in a box and brought across the ocean, hiring a home in a new place, not worrying about the language, to my grandfather's deportation and to his immigration. And I realized, that there are immigrations and then there are immigrations, and I had a very easy move from one country to another, even though I found it very difficult. And in the last, I would say, 10 years, I have become very interested in this idea of the ancestors. Maybe because I've lost both my parents, and I realize that I'm soon to become an ancestor, and that there are responsibilities that we all have to those who come after us. And I was in Finland in October last year on a writing residency, and the night I arrived in Finland, I had a dream. And in my dream, I dreamt about my grandfather. This is the first time in my life I've ever dreamt about my grandfather. He was a young man in my dream. He was wearing jeans and trainers, which I never ever saw him wear in his life. He was always, dressed in a suit. And he was getting ready to dance. And we were looking at books together. And I woke up the next day and I thought, what a strange dream. To dream about my grandfather, about books, and he's excited, he's so happy. He's a young man and he's dancing. And this thought about this dream kept playing in my mind. And over the course of the weeks that I was in Finland, I realized that I looked at a map and I saw Helsinki and Žagara are this far apart on the map. I am so close to this place that my people come from. And my whole life, as an author and as a person, I've been searching for this feeling of, where do I belong? Where do I come from? I've always envied people who are indigenous to a place. I have indigenous Australian friends whose people have been there for 40,000 years. I have never felt I come from here. We immigrated. My grandparents immigrated to South Africa. They were tolerated as Jews. Jews were actually not allowed into South Africa for many years. They were tolerated. They weren't really regarded as white. And then moving to Australia again was the reason we left, was because of the violence. I arrived there and also didn't feel quite like I belonged. I've always envied this idea and always been looking for this place of, where do I fit? Where do I belong? Where do I come from? Even going to Israel, which I've been to in a few times in my life, I never felt I come from this place. It was also felt a bit strange to me, So I've always wanted to come back. Žagara was a word that I heard growing up, Daheim. My grandparents spoke about Daheim, the home, where we come from. My grandmother wrote poems about Žagara. First of all, love stories to Žagara, growing up there, the beauty of the place, how much she loved it, a few landmarks, and then the curses on Žagara, curses on Lithuania, because her whole family were murdered in Narushkin Park in that big massacre that took place there on the 2nd of October 1941. And so none of my family members ever wanted to come back to Lithuania. In fact, when you talk about Lithuania to Jewish people, immigrants in Australia and South Africa, they go, I would never step foot in Lithuania. The streets are soaked with Jewish blood, So I've always been a bit scared of Lithuania. It's where all my people were killed. But I felt like my grandfather had come to me in a dream. I'm so close, and I don't know at the age that I'm at that I will have another chance to fly from Australia all across the globe, to be this close and not to go to Jagari. So I made a plan to extend my trip, and I made a plan that I was going to come to Jagari. My only thought was, I will find the grave site where my grandmother's family were killed. I will say Kaddish. I will say Kaddish in the market square where people were murdered. And then I will meet my cousin Sam, the one that put me in touch with Veldis. She will fly from London. We will meet in Liepaja, which is where my grandfather's family were murdered, on a beach. And we will say Kaddish together. So this was like my mission. I'm coming to say Kaddish. So I prepare myself emotionally to come to Lithuania. And I'm scared. I think it's probably full of anti-Semites. I don't know. I don't want people to know I'm Jewish. And I make a plan. I come to Riga. I get someone from Jagara to pick me up and drive me to Jagari. And I'm only there for 2 days because I'm just coming to say Kaddish. And I arrive in Jagari and going through the streets, and my whole body, I mean, I just had a physical reaction to being in this place because of a letter that my grandmother wrote, that my grandfather puts in his memoir, which says, "Hey, Solomon, if you want to meet me, this is where I live," and she has her address. Because of that, I found the house that my grandmother lived in Jagara, and I walk into this garden and I'm looking, imagining my grandmother lived in this place and she walked here. I go to the Narushkin Park, I say Kaddish. It's very emotional, very sad, but I didn't want to leave. I just had this feeling like I'm not finished with this place. It's like I want to hate it, and I can't. I love it. I love it here. And my heart feels open here, and I want to stay, and I want to walk the streets, and I want to swim where my grandparents swam, and I want to touch all the buildings, and I want to sit under the trees, and I want to swim in the river. And then I met my cousin in Liepaja, and we said Kaddish there on the beach, and then I left. And I went actually to Israel, and I went to the Nova Music Festival site, and I went to Sderot, and I felt like I wanted to go and just honor all these places where Jewish massacres had happened. And every place I went, I said Kaddish, and I said Psalm 23, which is, the Lord is my shepherd, Adonai Ro'i, Lord and Lochsar, and the line that I kept saying was, Gam ki elech begetz hamavet lo irara ki ata imadi. In Hebrew, in English it is, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. And when I got back to Sydney, I actually had that line tattooed in my arm here because I felt like after October 7th, and all the anti-Semitism and everything that this trip had taken all these pieces of me and like compressed them into like strength inside of me. I felt my spine was like so strong inside of me. I know who I am. I know where I come from. I know where my people come from. I felt like I knew something clear about myself. And 2 weeks after that was the Bondi massacre in Australia, where Jews were gunned down again. And again, the question came to me, where do I belong? Where am I? I said to my husband, did we make a mistake coming to Australia?
Bondi Beach was just near where you live.
Oh, it's 3 kilometers from where I live. One of my very best friends was involved in that shooting. She was thankfully spared, her and her 5-year-old daughter, but they could have been killed like so easily. They were in the massacre, inside the massacre zone. It was too close. Anyway, I think this was during this time that Veldis and I started to connect by email and WhatsApp. Veldis said to me, this book that your grandfather has written, he said, it's a jewel. I was like, really? Is it? Is it a jewel? He said it's the most amazing book. It's the only documentation of Jewish life in Jagara before, that life was destroyed. And so I went back to read this book now with completely new eyes, through Veldis's eyes, through the eyes of a different audience, not a family member, but somebody who is looking at this like, oh, this is history. This is history here that my grandfather has captured, And in this book, he writes, he hopes that a grandchild will go on to maybe, share this book more wildly. And then I think about the dream I had of him coming to me when I was just so close to Jagara, saying, go, just, go back to your roots and find your roots. And my relationship with Veldis has mostly been by WhatsApp. We've been communicating by WhatsApp for, 5 months. And he has been so supportive of this project, saying it should be translated into Lithuanian. There are people who will be interested. And I'm like, will there really? Will there be people interested? He seems to think so. And what has happened over this week of us being together is that he's helped me to have a different feeling about Lithuania, because I've always had this understanding that Lithuanians were just collaborators, and in the war that they were the ones who executed all these terrible massacres, all these lost shtetls, all these people who were murdered. And over this week, I've had these conversations with Veldis, who's also shown me that there were many Lithuanians who saved Jewish people, that the stories that we have about Lithuanians, that it's more complex. It's not just so black and white. And so working with him on this project for me feels very much like I'm working with a non-Jewish Lithuanian man who has helped me to come back here and feel like maybe this is a place that I belong. He's helping me to try and get Lithuanian citizenship. He's gone to such efforts to make me feel, he keeps saying to me, this is your land. This is your land, I don't really know what that means, to feel like this is my land, this is a place that I belong, but I do feel everything is new for me here, but very familiar, and I feel like I could belong here, everything feels, I'm so amazed. Vilnius is such a Jewish place. Everywhere I go, on street corners, there's Hebrew, there's Jewish museum, there's Jewish memorial, there's this, that. It's so Jewish. I'm like, what the hell is going on here? I have had no clue, about anything. So I feel like what he and I are doing is we are doing some kind of project together of repairing and building a bridge together, that I'm hoping other Jewish people now will not be afraid to come back to Lithuania, that people will visit, that they will hear different stories about this place, that they will, not go, Lithuania, never, I want to be an advocate for people to come here and to walk the streets and meet the people, and I feel safer here than I feel in Sydney as a Jewish person. It's a strange thing to say, but I do, and I've felt nothing but welcome. Obviously I need to learn more Lithuanian, but other than that, it's just been such a gift. Meeting Veldis has been a gift. The opportunity to work on this book has been a gift. Meeting so many of you, to know that there is a thriving Jewish community here in Vilnius. It's all been a gift. Come. Please come. Hello.
From theater to cinema, and from cinema I have 7 o'clock appointment.
So I no, I thought, you know, I mean, that's kind of our story, and we hope to, as an author, as a sort of a publisher, I'm going to bring out a new edition in English of this book. We've added new photographs, we've ordered the material in a different way. Valdis has made a wonderful suggestion about including all the names that my grandfather mentions in the book at the back, so that people will be able to maybe search for some stories about their family, and will be maybe able to find those, you know, those stories, some stories, just some mention of a family member. I know how desperate people are to have any information. And we visited the Museum of the Lost Shtetl in Shaduga the day before yesterday. I'm realizing how important that this is, the recovery of something that could have been lost, and that maybe my grandfather knew that. Maybe that's why he came to me in my dream dancing as a young man. And that's really where we are. We're hoping that it will be ready by October, but if not, you know, we'll when it's ready, you know. Valdis is putting time and effort and all sorts of, you know, resources into helping me with this. And I know my grandfather, wherever he is, is looking down and smiling, dancing, and is very happy that I'm here. I feel the blessing of my ancestors at my back. Yeah, and I'm just really grateful for the opportunity to come and talk about this, and I hope next time I'm here we have the new edition available, and that more people will read the book. Yeah? My father had a small little box of very precious photographs, and these are photographs that a lot of them were from Jagare. So these big pictures that are here were all taken in Jagare. They're pictures of my grandmother's parents who were sent as refugees into exile, and when they came back to Jagare, great-grandfather, he lost all his toes from frostbite and was very, they looked very unhappy. I can imagine, they were not exactly happy people. This is my grandfather's father, a very learned, very, very learned, pious man, believed in Hashem and study. And when my grandfather got smallpox, first of all, he lost his wife when my grandfather was 5, and then my grandfather's 2 younger brothers died. So he was left with like 5 children and no wife, and he did remarry, but my grandfather had his stepmother was terrible. She loved her goat more than she loved the children, and he when my grandfather got smallpox, he went to synagogue, he went to shul, and he prayed, and he renamed my grandfather Chaim, which means life, and he came back and he said, my son is healed. He believed by renaming him Chaim, he would live. These are pictures of my grandparents in Narushkin Park. They had a wonderful cultural life there. They used to put on plays and shows, and they used to send each other little notes. That's the one note that my grandfather puts in the book there, that my grandmother sent him because she fancied my grandfather. My grandfather lost his eye in a factory. He was learning to become a photographer, and one night he bent down in this factory and a hook on the wall went into his eye, and he lost his eye, and they had to rush to Riga. He had, you know, and he lost the eye. And in fact, Valdis drove me past the factory yesterday where my grandfather lost his eye in Jagare. So he had no eye, he had smallpox skin, and he and my grandmother, they married. They were exiled to the Ukraine. Then they came back, and that's when he met my grandmother. They fell in love. And my grandfather had uncles who had immigrated to South Africa, and he wrote a letter to a colleague in South Africa saying, should I come to South Africa, because he had a good job and he didn't want to leave it. And then a letter never arrived. So his father encouraged him to go. I think they felt that something terrible was coming towards them. I don't think they could have imagined the Holocaust, but they knew something bad was going to happen. So my grandfather booked tickets to go to South Africa. The night before he left, he found a letter hidden away. The letter was from his colleague in South Africa saying to him, "Don't come. It's terrible here. It's very hard to get a job. Black labor is cheap. It's very hard as a newcomer. If you don't speak English, don't come." But by now it was too late. He was supposed to leave the next day, and he said to his father, "Why did you hide this letter from me?" And his father said to him, "Because I was going to send it to you when things were better for you there." He said, "It's better that you go." He said goodbye to his father, and he never saw his father again. He never, ever saw his father again. So there's immigration and there's immigration. He came on a boat. I think the boat took 6 weeks. He brought his wife out a year later and his sister. And then he set up, it took a long time, but eventually he learned English. He applied to become a South African citizen. And eventually he set up his own printing business. And raised his children in South Africa. He had 3 children. My father was the youngest, but my grandmother was, when they found out that her whole family had been killed in Lithuania, she suffered a terrible heart attack and she never recovered, and she died when my father was 13. So he had a hard life. Then he remarried a Holocaust survivor, but he was such an optimist. You know how many times in this book terrible things have happened, and he goes, "But life was good, he's like, but we had a home, and we were grateful, and we were so happy, and he had such a strong spirit, And I met Vilnius's mother the other day. We went for dinner at Vilnius's mother's house, and I could see that they build them very strong in Jarara. She's 77 on her own, basically runs a farm by herself. Very tough. So it's wonderful for me to have a sense of where I come from and the life that he had. And so the story about the handkerchiefs is that in this book, my grandfather writes this funny little story. And it's as a writing teacher myself, I just love the way the story is just plonked in, like very close to the beginning, where he says, my grandfather, in addition to his normal occupation as a turner, he used to turn wood and make handles and doorknobs and things like that. He mastered the art of dispelling the infliction of the evil eye, ayin hara. He practiced this in an honorary capacity. Mothers would come to him with a handkerchief in their hand, give it to my grandfather, who would whisper a certain formula known only to himself, and he would then give the handkerchief back to the mother. If a child ran a high temperature, the mother would come to my grandfather for help because she could not afford the services of a doctor. He says, I myself suffered from many afflictions related further along, but I was immune to the so-called evil eye. This was possibly due to the fact that I had no mother to see to it. Unfortunately, I even suffered from an artificial eye since the age of 14, related in a later chapter, but never from an evil eye. My grandfather suggested that my father should take over this practice. He offered to disclose the secret to him, but my father refused to accept the honor. He did not believe in this hokum pokum, such a funny little word, like this nonsense, and regarded it as superstition. It once happened that a mother came when my grandfather was not at home, but my father was. The woman insisted my father should perform the doings instead. She would not take no for an answer. My father chanted on the quiet an appropriate psalm and gave the handkerchief back to the woman. Whether this helped the child or not, I do not know to this present day. So when I read that story, I started to think of this idea of whispering a blessing into a handkerchief, and I began to buy old handkerchiefs, and I've been stitching blessings into handkerchiefs since then, just as a way of trying to stay connected. The stitch. My grandmother was a seamstress, so I feel connected to her through the stitching. Stitching poetry. She was a poet, so I feel connected to her through that. And I feel connected to my grandfather's grandfather by stitching blessings into handkerchiefs. And now, instead of birthday presents, or when somebody's having a hard time, I stitch a blessing into a handkerchief and I give that as a gift now instead of other kinds of gifts. So that's the story with the handkerchiefs. And then these books, well, this was as I told you, this was my first novel, which was, I stole all the stories about living in a shtetl from my grandfather's book. But my father was a famous political cartoonist in South Africa for many years, 50 years. He documented the politics of South Africa through apartheid, the rise of the ANC. And for 35 years my father worked on this book called Gagman, and the story that he was working on was about a man in the concentration camp who survives by telling jokes to the commandant. He has to be funny. Now my father was a political cartoonist, he had to be funny. He had like 5 jokes and deadlines that he had to meet every single week. And so this is it's a story, it's a novel about and it's also got some of my father's drawings and cartoons in here. But my father could not finish this book, and so when my mother was diagnosed with cancer, I knew I had to help him finish. I'm very good at finishing things. It's one of my superpowers. I can finish. Some people are good at starting things. I can. That's one of the reasons why I mentor writers, because I can help people finish. I know how to shut all the gates that help you get to the end. My father was too creative, he had too many ideas, he just didn't know how to finish. He could do a short cartoon, but a book is something that takes a long time. So I stepped in and I helped him finish this book, and unfortunately my mother died before it was published, but I helped him find a publisher, and I brought a copy for the library here, so I'm leaving this here. And then I also brought a copy of my latest memoir, which came out in March this year, called Bring Us Home from Sorrow. It is a book about losing my mother. And it's also about ocean swimming, because I'm a big ocean swimmer, and it's about grief and about how swimming helped me to get through my grief of losing my mother. Again, I feel like a lot of the work that I'm doing now has got to do with these ancestral stories that need to be finished. And I feel like Veldis and I are closing a circle with Shalechet. I feel like we were talking yesterday about how our stories intersect. Veldis comes from Jagare. My family come from Jagare. I asked him yesterday, and I'm going to ask him again, why does he care? Why does this matter to him to be working on this project with me? Veldis, do you remember what you said?
Yes, I remember. It's very obvious and clear. It's very simple. That my Jewish story, because I have 2% of Jewish blood in me, and all the research, DNA is a fantastic thing to learn. So say about 20 years of my communication with Jewish people who come from Jagare, shown me that we've lost the civilization that was living, like the way we think we know of Egyptian civilizations, other civilizations. Nobody speaks, there's Jewish rumor, there's Jewish this, that, the Holocaust, but nobody said to me that we've lost a civilization. And the value of it, the potential of it before war, the culture, the ties, the two communities living side by side, the value of it is so huge. It's difficult to evaluate it. So that's what I'm doing. There's nobody doing. Somebody must be doing. So there I get the drive. There I get my energy and motivation.
I mean, I think it's unusual And I think he is an unusual person, and it was because I had somebody reflect back to me the value of this book. I think without that, I don't know that I would have appreciated the value of my grandfather's book. And so it's like Valdis has given me the opportunity to return to Lithuania. We spent the first 2 days him educating me about Lithuanian history, real Lithuanian history, not all the horror stories, the other stories, the stories I don't know. You know, there's so much I don't know. Even though my grandfather wrote this, there's still so much I don't know. I don't know about, you know, the last, 40 years of Lithuanian history here, the impact of Russian occupation, the impact of all these things on Lithuanians. And that's been really wonderful to just quietly listen and wonder again, like, is this a place that I could be? Is this a place that has space for me? I definitely know that I want to keep coming back, I want to keep coming back, and Valdis has been really insistent that I must get my Lithuanian citizenship. And so he's been helping me to try and see if that's a possibility. And we went with the lawyers the other day, and they seemed to think there was a good chance, and I just, when that happened, I also felt, you can tell when something is real and true because of the way your body reacts. I just felt tears come to my eyes, when I was saying how this feeling, I've always longed for this feeling to belong somewhere, and the lawyer said, well, let's try and make that legal, he said. I thought, wow, that's just an amazing thing. I thought, what would it be like for me to have a Lithuanian passport? And then when you advertised this event, and it was this Lithuanian litvakų author, I've been called a South African author, I've been called a Jewish author, I've been called an Australian author, but I've never been called a litvakų or a Lithuanian author. But spending the more time I spend here, it's a feeling. Walked the streets of Vilnius for the first time again, my body just like the tears, I just felt tears. I don't understand why, but my people walked here, my people came from here, my people came from here, Valdis's people came from here, and it's such a wonderful, feeling to know that I've brought my ancestors back, because the reason we went to Žagarė the other day was to return this portrait that my father did of my grandfather, and this photograph of the Žagarė Benefit Society. And I felt like I was bringing them home. They lived here under such terrible conditions. They never wanted to come back, and I brought them back, and now they will be displayed in this place of honor in Žagarė, and that feels very meaningful. I'm so grateful, and thank you for all being here and listening to us talk about the story. Thank you very much. Thank you for your translation. Thank you for your attention. Thank you to Valdis. Thank you to you, beautiful photographer and videographer, and for you for inviting us here, and for all of you for taking your precious time to come and listen to us talking tonight.